Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst and popular analyst at that, joining us on the program. Emotional weekend there. What did you expect was going to happen with the final game there with Coach K at Cameron?
I didn't know. As you said, there was an emotional element to it that none of us could predict, how we'd feel. And even though we knew this was coming since last spring, the finality of it and the fact that there was so much, it was like a royal wedding in a way. I mean, there was so much pomp and circumstance around it. The media coverage, I mean, the media camped out there was incredible. So it was kind of an odd feeling. And then having all the former players down there before the game, it was really cool to see everybody, but it was so different than anything I've ever been through before. But there were parts of it that were incredibly cool. You just wonder, is it going to impact the game? And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know whether it did or didn't. I mean, before the game, everybody talked about the emotion is going to be this great weight on the players and all that. But I think I had said, if Duke wins, everybody's going to say they rode the wave of emotion to a victory. If they lose, they're going to say it was a huge distraction and a reason they lost. All that stuff's just a sort of an excuse or rationalization. It may have been a factor, but at the end of the day, you have to play, and Carolina was just better.
If I would have said to you in 1985, we're going to get to this point with Coach K where we might be celebrating him as the greatest college basketball coach of all time, what would you have thought?
I mean, I wouldn't have disputed it, but it's certainly hard to imagine that anyone could stick around somewhere 40 plus years and have this kind of success. I mean, when my class, which included Johnny Dawkins, Mark Allery, David Henderson, and Tommy Amaker was the next year, when that group left, there was no guarantee they'd ever have a team that good. I mean, we won 37 games that last year we were there, and that was a record. An all-time record. And it took till 2012 till Kentucky won 38 to beat that. And Coach K had 2 or 3 37-win teams after that, and Final Fours and national championships. I mean, a coach makes one Final Four, it's a career maker, and he's made 12 and has a chance for another one this year. That just, that's where, when I was always really sensitive growing up in Los Angeles to the John Wooden discussion of the greatest of all time, that people would try to take Wooden down a peg by saying, well, they played in the West and it was easy to get through the West. And he had Alcindor and Walton. Well, that was true. I mean, he won 5 titles with Alcindor and Walton. He won 5 without them. And but Coach K did it at the highest level for longer. Like Wooden won 10 in 12 years, which will never happen again. To say it's extraordinary is an understatement. But the argument for Coach K against Wooden is that he did it for 40 years, as number one and all these different things, did it in the television and internet era when there were so many changes going on. It's really, really remarkable. I'm not sure we'll ever see his like again in that regard.
I was wondering about this. You go back to Johnny Dawkins, which to me was sort of that transformational recruit that Coach K got. And then he convinced Leitner's mom to not go to North Carolina and go to Duke. Grant Hill convincing him and his father not to go to North Carolina was going to get Leitner and Hill. And, so if you look at those three, is that correct, though, that was sort of what was happening at the time, that Johnny, I think, was a big difference maker coming in, and then the fact that he talked Leitner and Grant Hill out of going to North Carolina?
Yeah, that was the big turning point. Johnny Dawkins is the most important player to ever play at Duke. It's certainly under Coach K. But for Johnny Dawkins, I'm not sure this happens. Yeah. Maybe it does, but I'm not sure it does. The key guy, though, before Leitner and Hill in the Duke versus North Carolina recruiting battle was Danny Ferry. Danny Ferry was a high school senior in 1985, and Carolina was all over him. And back then, when Carolina recruited you, you went. And Duke got Ferry as the number one player in the country. And that was when the tide started to shift and it became a fair fight in recruiting. And Duke could get a player that Carolina wanted. So that was the one. And Ferry went to 3 Final Fours during his period there and was National Player of the Year and one of the best college players, frankly, I ever saw. So that was the guy that I think greased the skids for, the Duke versus Carolina recruiting battles. And the truth is, Dan, Duke and North Carolina recruited the same guys and still do. And I always thought it was funny, like Duke recruited. I was a grad assistant when Duke was recruiting the heck out of Eric Montross, and he chose Carolina, and Carolina recruited the heck out of Leitner and Hurley and all that. And Carolina fans hated Leitner and Hurley, and Duke fans hated Montross, who may be the nicest person that's ever lived. And you're going, do you guys realize if they'd made a different decision, you would have put statues up of the guys you claim you hate? But on both sides, it just both schools recruit unbelievable guys, and there's not a better person on the planet than Hubert Davis. And if he had gone to Duke, he'd be a Duke icon, and they tout him. But he went to Carolina, so they don't care for him. It's just that's part of the rivalry, I guess.
But I look back on Leitner, and I know Leitner was so important to the program, but did he also create sort of that us against the rest of the world mentality by his style of play, his personality?
Yeah, that probably started with Ferry a little bit, and Ferry and Quinn Snyder kind of brought Leitner up, and they were pretty hard on him when he was a freshman. And Leitner had unbelievably tough skin. He's probably, in addition to being arguably the best player ever at Duke, he was the best competitor that's ever played there. That dude was unbelievable. And I don't remember him, Dan, ever getting outplayed, whether it was Shaquille O'Neal or whomever. O'Neal may have been a better player, but he didn't outplay Leitner. I don't remember anybody ever doing that. And Leitner, like I used to play tennis with Leitner, and, he played ping pong and, ridiculously competitive in those things. And people don't believe this, but it's true. Leitner at 6'10", 6'11", whatever he was, could get in a handstand and walk on his hands from one baseline to the other. He was an extraordinary athlete, not in the run and jump sense. He was a good athlete, but an extraordinary athlete in the things that he could, the different things he was capable of doing. Like when you and I were kids, athlete meant could play a lot of different sports and do a lot of different things. Now it means run and jump. But Leitner was an extraordinary athlete in that way.
He's Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst. Did it feel like the end of an era on Saturday?
Yeah.
Not just Coach K, but I'm talking about college basketball.
Yeah, but I've felt that before. When Bob Knight left Indiana, or when Dean Smith retired, or when I was a kid when Wooden retired at the Final Four in 1975. You felt like, oh boy, it's never going to be the same, and it is never going to be the same. But in one part, there's sadness because he's leaving, but on the other part, it's exciting. It's exciting for the next chapter for him and his family, but it's also exciting for the game too, because there are other people that are going to step in. So I'm not worried about the game, just like I wasn't worried about it when one and done, or worried about it when we've had the 3-point line came in or other changes. The game will be just fine. But Bob Knight said this about Henry Iba. Well, I think when he went in the Hall of Fame, of all the shadows cast in the game, his is the longest. And I kind of feel that way about Coach K, that the shadow he's cast in this game is the longest there's ever been. There have been some pretty long ones with Dean Smith and Bob Knight and Pete Newell, you name it, all the great coaches. And the current guys now, like with Boeheim and Izzo and Calipari and all these guys, we've had some iconic coaches. But one thing that is changing is now that the game, it's been professional for a long time, but now that it's really professional, with the players able to monetize their talent and the transfer portal, now the coaches are not supreme like they were in the past. They have to change the way they do business. And so, we're going to see a little bit of change in that. We may not have the super powerful kind of royalty type coaches like we've had. It may become a little more professional in that regard too.
Great to talk to you again, Jay. We'll talk to you tournament time. Thanks for joining us as always.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
That's Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst.